Ignition sequence starts. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
Hey everybody, this is the Digital Asset Investor, and one of the things that today, as a 50-year-old man, really pisses me off is that when I was young, I remember in the America I grew up in, it was inspiring to see people that had made it, people that had become wealthy, stories like Jeff Bezos. I lived through this time. Watch this.
Paul's company, Amazon.com, Earth's biggest bookstore. You can't drop by, not in person anyway. For the customer, Amazon only exists on the computer screen. We didn't see anything that looked vaguely cutting edge. No corporate drives or office towers. Just a heroin needle exchange and an old building called Columbia. But it had the number 1516, so we walked inside. And there it was, the logo known to every web shopper in the world. Well, I've heard a lot about your desk.
It's a door with 4x4s.
Come on.
What?
I mean, you can afford a better desk than that.
It's a symbol of spending money on things that matter to customers and not spending money on things that don't.
And you don't need clean carpets. When Bezos left that Wall Street job in 1994, he followed that old American edict, go west, young man. He and his wife didn't know where they were going. In fact, the movers packed their things and were already on the road when Bezos phoned them to say he had decided on Seattle. In July of 1995, from this modest ranch house outside Seattle, Bezos sold his first book. Today, he has 5 huge warehouses in the United States and Europe.
So that is what you call the American dream, folks. And now the guy this is his yacht now. Now that's not to say that everybody should aspire to have a yacht or that everybody wants to have a yacht. I don't want a yacht. But what made America what it is that everybody knew that in this country they could aspire to these things, and whatever your goal is, whatever you aspire to do, that in this country you got a chance to do it. And now that's what pisses me off about the Gary Genslers and the Elizabeth Warrens of the world. Now we have to listen to Elizabeth Warren talk about guys like him like they're a bad guy. Think about how many jobs by this guy creating his goals and setting out to do what he did. Think about how many jobs that guy has created over the last 20 years versus Elizabeth Warren being a professor at Harvard and then going and becoming a politician and becoming a millionaire as a politician. What has she done? Nothing. And what has Gary Gensler done? A career bureaucrat? Nothing. And they seek to destroy, whereas this is what inspires the young people, or used to in this country, is to become something. It doesn't necessarily mean to become rich, but for a lot of people, for me it was that. I wanted to become rich. That's what I love about this whole space. That's what I love about what Link2, my sponsor, is doing. In fact, through the weekend, Link2, back in the .com boom and bust and all that, going IPO was everything. This time it's even better because we have IPOs and we have digital assets, both of which money can be made on. Unfortunately, we have the Elizabeth Warrens and the Gary Genslers that are trying to throw a wrench in that, but a lot of it's still there for the taking. As a side note, this weekend, Link2, my sponsor, they've lowered the minimum investment to $2,500. You should aspire for something, whatever it is you want. You should be very optimistic about your life. And unfortunately, now it's like we have to work around bureaucrats and politicians that apparently hate this country and hate innovation and success and optimism for what this country can be. They're too busy sticking their hand out trying to work the system for themselves. It makes you sick. Anyway, go check out Link2. Now, because of a lot of those sicko politicians and bureaucrats, we're now in this situation. And this is the way our country now works, is based on what politicians want and all this stuff. So for the next 6 months, and I even studied this when I was in school, for the next 6 months, you can bet that there's going to be most likely a good economy, or at least a perceived good economy, because it's a presidential election year.
So your assumption is that they're going to try and hold off until the election. That may be the way that they go, or they could absolutely collapse everything right before the election as a reason to, bring in some sort of an emergency. Would you put that past them?
Well, I'm not in the room, but if they collapse it before the election, it's because they lost control. Right now, they're sticking fingers in the dike. The credit markets are there's credit issues in commercial real estate. Regional bank stocks are cratering. The Federal Reserve is pausing interest rates, which if you look back in history, after every one of these big bubbles they blow, once they pivot and pause and start lowering interest rates, that's when the real economic damage comes. So we're right on the precipice of this. Also, money supply M2 went negative for the first time since 1930 in November of 2022. And there's usually an 18-month lag on monetary changes actually impacting the economy. So 18 months will be May. So the next 6 months for the establishment is very precarious. They're going to try to pump this up and keep it going. The jobs report in the U.S. just came out today. Anybody worth their salt has called this the most fraudulent jobs report we've ever seen. It's a joke. It's a complete joke. It's literally fraud is now on the government balance sheets. They're cooking the books.
We have a government that's like Enron now. So, and then I believe that they're doing a controlled demolition. I've said this for a long time, and I think this guy's pretty right over the target with the Black Swan capitalist guys.
It goes with you don't want anybody to make money if you're trying to hollow them out. So you first inflict immense economic hardship on them so that the necessary bull market sees minimal participation by individuals, and the corporatocracy is the primary participants and the originators
no
of the
copyrighted music.
So
there,
the extreme
guys.
worldly wealthy are not going to allow themselves just to be broken down to 10 million because the debt markets are collapsing and they hold all the debt. They have seeded the new system, and they are the big holders in the new system, and they're going to inflate that as they deflate that. So it'll be directly proportional, and they will be maintaining and expanding their wealth, and we're going to have a bigger hollowing out of the middle and serfdom as the result. And that's the problem most people facing this crypto.
Very interesting ideas. Now, speaking of interesting ideas, here's David Schwartz in an X Spaces on the where he's talking further about the AMMs.
I'm excited about the AMM amendment, particularly because I have access to investment products of all kinds. It's very easy for me to put my money wherever I want, but there's a lot of people who just don't have good options. And the AMM doesn't get 100% to that, because AMM putting funds into an AMM is not exactly safe, because you always have exposure to some volatile asset. I would think of an AMM as a safe place to keep money relative to, let's say, just holding Bitcoin or just holding XRP. In other words, if that's your comparison, it's fairly safe. But if your comparison is to putting money in a bank or buying, publicly traded stocks, it's not particularly safe, because you have exposure just to the whole volatility of the cryptocurrency space, if nothing else. But I'm really excited about things that will give people exposure, the abilities to get really safe return. I guess what we start out by trying to give millionaires, people have talked about over collateralized loans as a way to get millionaires tax efficient. I have a whole bunch of XRP and I've made millions of dollars on it. How can I spend it tax efficiently? That's interesting technically, and you can build market share that way, but does that make the world a better place? Whereas if you come up with a way to get people whose alternative might be stuffing cash in their mattress, a way to get a couple of percentage points at relatively low risk, that's more in the sort of make the world a better place kind of vein.
Hey, David, quick question.
David.
Okay, and then we have this. Here's another clip where he's talking about the automated market makers. Watch this, a little bit of that. I won't show the whole thing.
Now something near and dear to my heart, the automated market maker specification. I almost said automated money maker, which actually is kind of fun.
So what's an automated market maker? An automated market maker is also a type of decentralized exchange protocol that pool liquidity from the users. And for trade execution, it uses a mathematical formula that takes into account the current liquidity of the assets in the pool and provide an instant quote for the trade. So instead of referring back to the order book to get a price quote, you'll get it as a result of a mathematical formula, of a predefined algorithm.
So I believe the most important component for an AMM-based DEX is the liquidity pool. So essentially, that is a smart contract that can hold assets and has this embedded algorithm to compute the exchange rate between two different crypto assets. So compared with an order book-based exchange where you need where for a trade to be executed, you need a buy side and a sell side. With the AMM-based DEX, though, an exchange user is essentially trading against the liquidity pool. So in that sense, well, the exchange users will be the most important actor within this AMM-based DEX ecosystem. And we also need liquidity providers who would put liquidity in the liquidity pool. So the initial liquidity provider would deploy a pool contract by putting some initial funds into the smart contract to form a DEX pool, and afterwards the exchange users would essentially trade against the liquidity pool. So
the DEX launched in 2012. It allowed tokenization of any kind of asset and the ability to trade and move them in just seconds on chain. It provided like globally competitive liquidity, but there was no way to get yield. And sometimes there just wasn't the sort of liquidity that people might need. So RippleX focused on differentiating our DEX with automated market making in conjunction with the central limit order book and integrated with payments so that these three features work together to provide a feature set that is unmatched. This is not everybody else has automated market makers, now we have them too. This is everybody else had automated market makers because they couldn't build an order book. Imagine an order book on Ethereum. If you think about how order books work, as prices change, people place offers at different rates. They cancel previous offers. If it cost you $13 to place an offer that nobody's likely to take, just to provide liquidity in case someone needs it, that's completely untenable. If your transactions take 10 minutes to confirm, you can't track price changes. We have our own order book because we can, and the functionality of both of them together is just, I don't have words to convey how excited I am about this feature.
No words to convey. Now, wanted to point out to you, the XRP Unleashed documentary trailer is at almost 500,000 views in around 24 hours, folks. This thing is obviously going to be huge. And I wanted to show you, here's another behind the scenes thing they had on their Twitter handle. That music reminds me of the movie Catch Me If You Can. I wonder if that's where they got that sound. Wow, it's going to be interesting. Well, I took the liberty. Jay Clayton did an interview where he addressed his thoughts on the Ripple, the SEC versus Ripple decision. So I decided I would clip it out and correct Jay Clayton a little bit.
Of course, your last filing, like last case before you left, was against Ripple. Any thoughts you have on how the court judgments came out of Ripple? Obviously, there was kind of a mitigated with some wins for the SEC and some others for XRP and Ripple. Like, what's your view on it, looking back at it right now, like 2-3 years after you left office?
Well, look, the way the court is now, and this is a case that has not been finally resolved. There are appeals and the like. But if you look at the distinction I made at the beginning of our discussion between securities transactions that are for the purpose of capital raising, where I said we have very rigorous regulations, and then securities regulation for secondary trading. You look at what the court did, it said, hey, that capital raising transaction was a securities transaction. Now, the court found that the secondary trading transaction and its definition of secondary trading transaction was not, We'll see how that goes on appeal. We'll see how both of them go on appeal.
Yeah.
But the point I want to make is that we rigorously regulate the raising of capital from the general public, and that has not changed.
Okay, so I'll talk a bit about the funding model. So we will have a fundraiser for 2 months starting February 1st. It will be available at funds.ethereum.org. So the idea is that part of the initial issuance will be 1,000 Ether for 1 Bitcoin, or up to 2,000 Ether for 1 Bitcoin if you get in early to compensate for the increased risk. So the issuance model is that we will fundraise. Suppose that we hand out X Ether through the fundraiser, then there will be about 0.5x will be pre-mined, and then 0.4x after that will be mined per year forever. So it's this hybrid of the Mastercoin and Ripple model and the pure Bitcoin mining model, and even to a slight extent the inflationary model.
The SEC is trying to capture the digital asset space. They went after Ripple and specifically XRP because it was the biggest threat to the incumbent banking and financial system.
You know, the United States government is probably the biggest bully in the world. I read the complaint and it was terrible news. People are going to lose money, and people had their life savings in XRP. All right, welcome to Regulatory Capture 101, also known as ETHgate.
Wow. Then I made sure I wanted to point out to everyone that I'll refresh that. This is a partial list of the different news outlets and crypto personalities that will not even acknowledge ETHgate, the potential corruption around it, or the upcoming XRP Unleashed documentary. I wonder why. I think it's important to keep some of these names like Laura Shin and Anthony Pompliano out in front of everybody, because they won't even speak on these things, which tells you plenty. Now, we're about to go in DAIXRP.com, and I'm going to show you the darker side of all of this and where I believe some of this goes. I'm the digital asset investor. I'm not an investment advisor. This is for entertainment purposes only. Please subscribe, hit the like button, tell your friends and family. Let's go look at the darker side of ETHgate.